I can be, yeah.
All right, welcome everyone. We're going to have another great talk by Scott, and I'm sure you guys want to hear me talk, so I'll just pass it off to him right now.
Okay. Hey, I am broadcasting. Okay, so I have two talks I'd like to give this afternoon here. The first one's about half an hour or so, called Ace the Interview. This is like what you can expect when you're out there looking for your first job. What you can expect from Capcom if you'd like to come work with me, just tell you a little bit about the process, what we do, and the things that we expect you to know on your first day. So, so there's nothing out there that, is going to be a big surprise to you. You're not going to get stumped in that interview. The second talk that I want to give is a significantly more advanced one. It's, what do I call it? I call it Performance on the Xbox One. I forget, and the only time you should ever use a bubble sort. So, do we all know what a bubble sort is? So this talk is, if you feel like you don't know much C++ or you don't know any C++ at all, it might be a bit over your head. This is going to get really, really deep into C++ and the type of stuff that we do on a daily basis at a very large game company. So it's things that most of us, myself included, did not learn in university. I learned it entirely on the job, but it'll give you some kind of perspective of the level of code that we're actually writing in the console gaming world. So let's start with the first one here, Ace the Interview. So I want to start out telling you a bit about my career. A lot of us here have only ever been students, and we've never actually gone out and found a career job. So here's a bunch of companies that I interviewed at that didn't offer me a job. And I thought I did very well on a lot of those interviews, and they phone you back, the recruiter calls you back and says, hey, we're not going to go with you, we're going to hire somebody else. And it's quite a frustrating thing. A lot of us are going to be in that situation throughout our career. So here's a list of companies that downsized me. You are going to lose your job at some point in your life. If you decide to get into the industry, there's no more stories like my grandpa who worked for the phone company for 40 years and then got his pension and he was done. That just doesn't happen anymore. In the modern tech world, if you work somewhere for about 5 years, you've probably done pretty well. Companies go through rough financial times all the time. You hear about layoffs, and there's a good chance that could be you. You probably will get laid off at some point in your life. It's not the end of the world because they do have to give you a bunch of money to get rid of you. And it gives you a chance to go out and look around a little bit and think about what you want to do next in your life. Gives you a few months to go find that next job that you want. And here's the amount of companies that I turned down. I have had way more offers than I can count. On the flip side of the equation, there's going to be times in your life when business is booming and you go to 5 different interviews and you get 5 different job offers. And now you get to choose which one you want to take. You get to negotiate a little bit. So, there's both sides of that equation there. That first job, the first job that I ever got, that was by far the toughest one to get because you don't know anybody in the industry. You don't know anything about, what's expected in a professional work environment. You've always been a student your whole life. So my one suggestion for you too, and I've seen it happen all the time, wherever you go, do not burn a bridge because it's a small world. So the second job that you're going to get is probably because your friend who you worked really well with at your first job went somewhere else and he wants to work with you again. So make friends with everybody who you work with. Don't burn bridges. You don't want to get a bad reputation. It'll come back to get you. So let's talk about Capcom a little bit. We're a company, our studio in Vancouver, it's based out of Japan. There's about 3,000 to 5,000 employees in Japan. It's very large. In Vancouver, we've got 200 people. We're always working on one franchise game. We also have a couple other concept games on the go. Capcom has a lot of different IP, a lot of different Capcom games that you played, and so there's a lot of stuff to do there. We're always working on one major project, but every month, you just lose people. If you have 200 people in your company, you're going to lose people. So every month, we lose 3 or 4 programmers. About once a week, a programmer quits. And that's just how it is. He found something else. He wants to leave town. His wife got a job in California. They're going away. How many programmers do you think we hire every month? If we're losing 3 to 4, right now we're hiring about 3. And the reason why, Canadian dollar right now is low. Electronic Arts is just up the hill from us. They're about 500 meters away. You know, you can walk up there in 5 minutes to meet your friends for lunch. Electronic Arts is sending all of their work to the Canadian offices right now because it's 70% on the dollar. You know, so it's quite cheap for them to make games in Vancouver right now. So it's a very competitive market. You know, programmers who are in Vancouver, high demand, and there's a lot of work out there for them. It's very tough to get a guy. Number of job postings we have. When I wrote this presentation a week ago, our website had 21 openings on it. And if we're hiring people, if we hire 3 people a month, you know, or 3 programmers a month, we're not even coming close to what we need. You know what the actual number of job openings we have, the number that we posted? We've got about 50. You know, there's 50 different roles out there that we can't find people to fill. Now, we're not just going to stick anybody in that seat. You know, we need somebody who can do the work, but, you know, there's lots of opportunity there. And every studio in Vancouver is going through this right now. The amount of resumes that we get each month, how many do you think this is? Get about 8. Electronic Arts probably does get 2,000, but some of the smaller studios, like, how many studios can anybody, who thinks they can name 5 game studios in Vancouver? Nobody in this room. Google it sometime. Look up, like, Game Dev Map. Look how many companies are there. There's about 100 game studios in Vancouver, anywhere in size. You know, some of them are smaller. Some of them have about 5 people. You know, but there's a lot of them with anywhere from 50 and then all the way up to EA that has, like, you know, whatever, 2,000, 3,000 people there. So there are a lot of companies there that you've never even heard of. You might not have even known that Capcom had a studio there. We've got 50 jobs we need to hire people for, and we've got computer science grads here who don't know that we're out there looking for you. So, you know, anyway, go to Game Dev Map, check all the companies there, submit some resumes, see what happens. Send me an email. So when you do come to work in a professional environment, there's a different leveling system, and every company does this, and it's all the way from, like, the new grad entry level all the way up to the highest executive, and everybody gets assigned a number. So at Capcom, we number them from 1 to 5. I think there might be a 6 in Japan. I think the big bosses are like 6, but, you know, it's very tough to get to that level. But, you know, it's based on the amount of influence, the scope of the influence that you have in the company. So if you're a new grad, you're going to come in as a level 1. And a level 1, you'll be given a feature, you'll be given something very enclosed to work in that's just yours. So, you know, let's say you're working on driving physics. You know, that's an example of a feature. And if I have a problem with driving physics, I'm going to come to you, and I'm going to expect you to have an answer for me. So that's what the level 1 does. And that's, as a new grad, you know, you're going to ramp up, and within a few months, we expect you to own something. You know, then we get to level 2s, the intermediate engineers. A lot of them are anywhere from 2 to 5 years experience. Depends how long it took them to, like, sort of broaden their ownership of stuff. They tend to own core features that the entire team would use. You know, let's say a systems guy who owns all the math libraries. You know, he's dealing with a lot of people on a daily basis. So that's the level 2. I'm a level 3. Level 3, we've got about 10 or 15 of us in the studio. We all do a number of different things there, but, you know, here we're influencing the entire game team as a level 3, and, you know, and on some levels influencing the entire studio. Me coming here to talk to you is something that we would never ask a level 2 or a level 1 to do. You know, this is something I'm going out, I'm helping out the HR department, I'm helping fill a bunch of roles here. Level 4, the director level, these guys make gigantic tech decisions. They're usually people who've been in the industry for 20 years. You know, my boss is a level 4. You know, and they make decisions like, which game engine are we going to build our next game on? You know, something that the entire company and the entire direction of what every single person in that office is doing is, you know, is dependent on the decisions that these people make. And then it goes all the way up to level 5. We used to have more level 5s. The Japanese bosses came in and got rid of them all. Our company used to be a lot more like Apple, where the direction came from the top down, and the Japanese bosses came in and they didn't like what they saw. So they came in and they fired all these execs, and they turned us into more of a Google company that all of the ideas are coming from the level 1, 2, and 3s, and they're coming up the other way. And it's the job of the level 4s and 5s to make sure that we get the money that we need to do what we want to do. So the level 5, we have one guy at the top, and he does not tell anybody what to do. We ask him for stuff, and he has to go to Japan and ask for money, ask for projects, ask for whatever. So it's quite a good thing when the direction of what you're doing on a daily basis is coming from the people in your work group, probably coming from you. You know, we're a very googly company now. What level do you think we want to hire the most? Level 1, exactly. And I don't want to sound too cynical about level 2s and 3s, but you know, in this environment where it's very competitive in Vancouver, all of the good level 2s and 3s are taken. So if we get a resume from a level 2 who's looking for work, it's either he really wants to come work for Capcom, but there's not going to be 50 of those resumes coming in. You know, it's those tend to be the people who sort of bounced around from one company and couldn't really stick anywhere. So, you know, it's like we're looking for a lot of level 1s. There tends to be a lot more quality in the level 1s and a better long-term investment in hiring a level 1 than hiring a bunch of level 2s and 3s. So, again, why am I here? I want to hire you. You know, you're at a GameJam. This is the best thing you can put on your resume. You're going to come in with a whole bunch of experience, a whole bunch of opinions on what it's like to make games. And if you give me your resume, I know that you want to work with me. You're interested in doing this every day for the rest of your life. So here's how the whole process goes. Let's call it round 1. This was a screen from Super Ultra Dead Rising 3 round 5 results. So you've got to pass the resume screening. I think I already told you what you need on your resume. The GameJam, C++, best a computer science degree. This is if you're a programmer. If you're an artist, have a portfolio online. You know, we've got a bunch of people here who are interested in artwork. If you have an online portfolio with some great work in it, you know, put that online. Send us your resume, and you know, and chances are we'll talk to you. So after the resume screen, I think I already. Okay, there we go. Yeah, after the resume screen, okay, you have the right to hear back. Like, I know that a lot of us, you know, we're probably going to be frustrated. In a lot of companies, you send them your resume and you never hear back from them. You have the right to hear back from a company. If you took the time to send them a resume, they have, you know, you just need to get like an answer. If the answer is no, whatever, fair enough. But call the recruiter, call the front desk. You know, if in our case, send me an email. If you send a resume and you haven't heard back, send me an email. I will go walk to the recruiter's office, say, hey, could you respond to this person? And, you know, if they don't have the necessary skills that we're looking for right now, you know, can you at least let them know so they're not left hanging? So, you know, you have a right to that. Round 2, so if you make it past the resume screen, you're going to have a phone screen. And if you're here in Saskatoon, if you're not in Vancouver, chances are you're going to get 2 phone screens. The first one you're going to have with a recruiter, they're going to find out, you know, why are you interested in working at Capcom? Is it something that, you know, maybe you just spammed us with resumes? Maybe you already found another job and you're no longer looking. But, you know, it's why do you want to come work there? If you really are interested in coming to Capcom, then you're probably going to get an interview with somebody like me on the phone. You know, a technical interview. I'm going to start asking you some tech questions. You know, I'll ask you about some sorting algorithms, and you're going to have to be able to talk in detail, you know, and discuss intelligently some technical problems. So, you know, some of I think because you guys are here in Saskatoon, if you don't live in Vancouver, Capcom usually does two phone screens because, you know, we want to make sure of it. We want to get several opinions from within the Capcom studio about whether or not this person's worth following up on. And then because it's a big investment, your next interview is on site. And for somebody who's not in Vancouver, we fly you in, we put you up in a hotel for the weekend, you can check out the city, and you're going to come in there for a half day of interviews. You're going to get, you know, we're very structured the way we do it. We give you, you know, we give you 3 interviews, so you're going to have 2 that are with whatever your trade is. If you're a programmer, you're going to have 2 technical interviews. If you're an artist, you know, you'll probably meet with two different art type people, two of our artists. And then you get a fit interview that's usually with management. So the tech interviews, you're going to be asked coding questions, logic questions, all these other things. The fit interview is the manager is going to figure out if you're an easy person to manage. You know, are you easy to deal with? If somebody comes to you and gives you a bunch of tasks and asks you to prioritize them, are you capable of doing that? You know, how are you at dealing with large workloads? If I give you 10 days worth of work and you have 5 days to do it, what are you going to do? You know, and that might be a question you're going to get asked on your interview. What are you going to do? So, what did I do? Okay, again, I want to hire you. That's why I'm here. So you have an interview. Do's and don'ts. I've seen a lot of people come in for interviews. Hopefully I can help you out here. Do play Dead Rising. Don't come into an interview without playing the last game that we made, was Dead Rising 3. You know, if you're going to come in, be able to talk about it, be able to ask questions about it. That's the best thing that you can do. About half the programmers we get in have no idea what we make. You know, so it makes it very difficult for me to talk to them about some of the problems we're solving. Dress your best. You know, I'd say it's about half the people who come in dress like they're homeless, a little bit. You know, sorry to put it in a bad term, but you know, if so I had this friend, and he was a professional street performer. He was a juggler and a musician, right? And he used to dress like a clown, and like sort of the homeless bum clown. And he would go in and juggle and do magic. And he said, and then he started dressing in a nice suit and a top hat, and he looked like Charlie Chaplin with a cane, and he would do his magic. And he said he made 10 times the amount of money for doing the same show. And he said, you know, if you dress like you're homeless, you're going to get paid like you're homeless. If you dress, you know, like $1 million, people are going to pay you a lot of money. This is what he did for his job, was he went out and entertained people in the street. He made a good living doing it, made more than I do. So dress your best. I actually gave a guy a job. One of our build guys, I gave him the job purely because he wore a suit to the interview. He wore a really nice suit, and he gave me a really good handshake at the end of it. You know, and he was kind of borderline. And then when I got that handshake, I just thought for a second, like, when it comes down to the end of the project, there's always a level 1 engineer, an entry-level guy that I need to depend on to make sure all of the builds get out to Microsoft, that get out to Sony, and there's nothing wrong with them. You know, that they get all the right packaging. There's a lot of things you got to do. There's a process you got to go through. And if you mess up one bit, you get booted out of the submission, and you can't submit. You go to the back of the queue, so that might mean your game ships 3 weeks late. You know, and that can't happen. That's when people lose their job, and that's a lot of responsibility. So we gave a guy the job because he had a good handshake and he wore a suit, and that told me a lot about him. Many took this job seriously. Come in with an opinion. If I'm going to ask you a question, there are no questions in an interview that are yes or no. You know, I'm going to ask, if I ask you a yes-no question, we're going to talk about why it's yes or no, and I want to hear your opinion on it. And it better be a good answer. You know, it better be a good opinion. It doesn't have to be my opinion, but be able to back it up. If you don't know the answer to a question, say, I don't know, don't guess. So when I'm interviewing somebody, you're going to be probably really nervous, and I'm going to push you beyond what you know. You know, I could go into that interview and throw you a bunch of softballs like, oh, what's a pointer? What's a class? You know, what's a pure virtual function? I could ask you that, and you'll just keep, you know, answering it. That doesn't tell me anything other than, hey, you know a bit about C++. I'm going to get harder and harder and harder, and I'm going to keep upping the intensity of the questions until I get you to say, I don't know. Because that tells me what level you're at. That tells me how much you know about C++, about algorithms, about whatever it is. You know, just suck it up. You're going to get to that point in the interview, and chances are you might already have the job by the time you hit it. You know, we just want to know how good you are. It's also going to tell us, you know, a little bit about more about where we could put you within the company. You know, if there's 50 open positions in there, you're not interviewing for one of them, and each one of those positions has a different set of responsibilities. We're looking for a different person for each one of them. So if I notice that you have a strength in a certain area, you know, that's what this is all about. I want to gauge your ability in all these different areas. Don't put anything on your resume that you cannot talk about. Like I see this all the time. People will put something on their resume and they don't know it. And it's like, oh, I did a tutorial once. And it's like, well, okay, but did you actually use it? Did you actually do anything with it? Because anything on your resume that I actually care about, I am also going to ask you about. You could put, like, let's say, hey, I'm really good with Linux, and I don't care about that. We don't use Linux at work, so it's not going to help you get the job. It's not going to help you on your resume. But let's say we did care about it. I'm going to ask you a lot of questions about it. So anything on your resume, be prepared to talk about it. I see it all the time. People put stuff on there that they can't talk about, and it makes me doubt everything else on your resume. It's like, how much is this person lying about who they actually are? Don't be late. I've had several people come in, they're late for the interview, and they're there, and they have, like, lunch with them, and they're eating in front of me, and it's like, how seriously do you take this job? Like, be there 15 minutes early at least, be prepared for it. Don't say anything bad about people you've worked with in the past, or your profs, or anyone like that. We don't like people who are negative and trying to throw blame on other people. It's like, I think that someone like that is probably going to come into our office and they might try to do the same thing. Something might screw up in our project, and they might try just throwing blame on someone else. It's like, just don't blame anybody. And have questions for the interview. Interviews go both ways. It's not just you trying to get us to give you a job offer. This is also you trying to find out more about the company. Remember that you're going to be spending a lot of time in this office that you're going to. Find out more about the people who you're with, because those are going to be the guys and girls you're going for lunch with every day, for the next few years. Find out more about the company. So have a lot of questions. What do we have here? So, method to the madness. You come into an interview, these aren't just a bunch of random questions. It's actually, I'm going to show you what an interview looks like from my end. If I'm interviewing you, this is what I'm trying to figure out. This is the structure. At Capcom, everyone who is doing an interview has been through a training course and has learned a system on how to go about, like, interrogating or interviewing somebody and asking the right questions at the right time to figure out the right things. There are companies that don't take it as seriously as Capcom does. They just sort of say, hey, go interview this person. And, EA was like that. And I just went into a room, and I didn't know what to say or do in there. And now I've got to evaluate whether or not this person can do the job. So that person at Capcom, they've been through a bunch of training to interview somebody, and they're also going into it with a game plan. So this is what the game plan is I'm trying to figure out a bunch of things. Can you read the fine print there? Anyone read the fine print? I'm letting you in on a secret here. Hopefully that doesn't screen capture the fine print. I'm telling you because I want to hire you. This is what's going on in my head and in the head of every other Capcom employee when you come in for an interview. Does this person know C++? I need to find that out. I'm talking about programmers here. Artists, it's going to be a bit different. But can you debug code? If we throw a bunch of code on the whiteboard, I might ask you to write some C++ on the whiteboard, and then we're going to step through it line by line and debug it, and we're going to figure out what's going through each variable at each time, and where that thing's going to crash. Can you solve problems and apply an algorithm? If I give you a logic problem, can you apply some code to that that's going to solve my problem? How good is your linear algebra and vector math? Hopefully, in Unity, we've been dealing with a bunch of vectors. We've been dealing with a bunch of x's and y's and maybe a z, and we've had to do some math on that. Every programmer in a game company does vector math every single day, so you got to be good at it. Do you have a passion for games? Did you play my game? What game are you playing right now? Can you talk about it? What would make that game better? What do you hate about the game? Is there a game out there that you're completely embarrassed that you're playing, but you still play it anyway and you love it? And why? And be prepared to talk about these things, because you're going to be asked about it. Do you have a passion for code? Like, do you write code in your free time? Is this something that you really enjoy doing, or do you just see this as a means to, to pay your bills? Can you communicate? It's another thing, now, if you don't do well on one of these things, that's not the end of the world. It's more about where we're trying to put you within the company. I'll show you in a second. But, somebody who's good at communication is, we might put them in a role. We have a lot of tools programmers who are working with artists all the time. How do we get the artwork through the pipeline into the game? And the most important thing for a tools programmer, you've got to be able to communicate. You've got to be able to talk to non-technical people about technical things, and convey that information. So these are all things I'm trying to figure out. Do I like you? Sadly, this is part of your interview, is we are rating whether or not we like you, because you're going to be my best friend. You're going to be going for lunch with me every day. You're going to be hanging out. We're going to be partying together at the Christmas party. Spend a lot of, it's sad. You're going to probably spend more time with your coworkers than you will with your own family in your life. It's a sad thing, but it's true. So I better like you. You better fit in. So silently on every single one of these, in the back of my head, I'm giving you a score from 1 to 5. If you get a 3, that means you're good enough to do the job. This is the system that I'm coming up with in there. If you get a 2, okay, you're maybe not quite there, but maybe we could find a role where this isn't important. Like, let's say the communication thing. Let's say you weren't good at communication, and it's like, well, he's not able to communicate with producers and stuff, but we do have programmer roles that are more of the sort of backroom thing where you're dealing with, like, low-level systems, or the build guy, for example, that, you get your dark closet and you're asked to do something, and, you can make up for it in other ways. One is below expectations. It's sad, but we get people who come in for interviews who actually can't write code. It's usually people who have said things that aren't true on their resume, and this is really bad when this happens. Don't put anything on your resume that you can't talk about. And if you do this, you're probably going to get tagged as somebody who's not capable of doing the work. But if you get a bunch of 1s, and this is usually for people who are intentionally trying to lie about who they are, they end up not ever coming in for an interview ever again. So this will get you black flagged. If you get a 2, that's fine. You might not get the job at the time, but we'll say, hey, the recruiter might get back to you and say, like, hey, maybe your debugging isn't quite there, but talk to us again in 6 months. Go home, write some more code. If I interview somebody, I'm going to give some feedback to the interviewer. Say, hey, we're not hiring this person, but can you relay this information to them? Maybe they need to know a little bit more about C++. Ask them to write some more C++ in their free time, and get back to us in 6 months. But it goes the other way too. The good news, you can get a 4. If you get a 4, that means this person is above expectations for what we expect. Let's say from a new grad, well, this is somebody who already has several games on the market. This person is very passionate about games, very passionate about this job. Let's give them a 4. 5 means, hey, they're overqualified. Like, we're trying to bring in somebody at a level 1 level, and this person's like a level 2 or a level 3. Like, they've managed teams of people before. They know what they're doing. So chances are, if you get a 5, we're not going to give you an offer. What we'll do is we'll interview you for a different position at a different level, and we kind of do the process a little bit differently. You don't ever want to hire a superstar, somebody who's way overqualified for the job, because as soon as they get a job that they're qualified for, they're probably going to leave, and go to that better job. So this whole idea of hiring the superstar, it doesn't work in the real world. But I gave a guy a 5 the other day, and these are pretty rare that they happen. And it was a guy who he'd worked for Kodak for 20 years. He'd made a ton of money. He was a senior manager at Kodak, and he decided that he wanted to design video games for a living. So he went and he took video game design school, came to us, and he interviewed as a level 1 video game designer. And this is a guy who had managed 300 people. And I'm like, he is so overqualified for this. And I let the recruiters know. I was like, this guy could come into our company as a level 4, as a senior executive, managing entire teams. But no, he wanted to tune weapons. He wanted to do character creation and stuff like that. So, okay, we ended up hiring him as a level 1. Also remember, in your interview, as soon as you don't know something, say so, because it's not a bad thing to say, I don't know. A lot of interviewers, like myself, I want to push you to the point that you don't know something, because I'm just trying to gauge what your level is. So then what I do, I take my feedback and I go to the recruiter with my summary. So here's a sample summary that I gave for somebody, and we hired this guy, and you can see in there's 3 is a good thing. So we think 3, oh, that's 50%. No, 3 is a good thing. That means you are at the level we expect of somebody who can come in and do the job. If you had all 3s in there, you're getting the job, right? So 3 is a good thing. So this is somebody who their linear algebra and their debugging were a bit weak, but their communication was strong. So I was like, you know what, let's bring them in as a tools programmer. Like, debugging and math aren't as important there, but we need somebody who can talk to the engineers, non-technical people, about technical problems. And yeah, let's take him. And he's a likable guy, so we hired him. So I do that, and then I come in and I give this overall recommendation with a summary at the bottom. And in this summary that I give, like, let's say you didn't get the job, that's where I would give the feedback to say, hey, when you get back to this person, can you tell them, this is why we felt a certain way. These are things that they can work on to improve if they're going to come back to us in 6 months and, try to apply again for a job. So here's some sample questions that you are probably going to get asked in an interview. Be prepared for them. There's a lot of broad and open-ended questions. These are, what do we have here? Tell me about yourself and your strengths and your weaknesses. Be prepared to answer these. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Like, these are tough questions. If you're put on the spot and asked, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I don't know where I'm going to be in 5 years. Somebody's going to ask you this in an interview. So be prepared for it. There's a lot of difficult and ambiguous questions. Tell me about a time you had to deal with adversity. I don't even know what adversity means, but I got asked that once in an interview. So, why should we hire you? When I see a question like that, I think the interview is either they're a bit sadistic or they haven't been trained in how to interview somebody, because I don't know what you would possibly get from asking someone that question other than, burning another 5 minutes of the interview. We have 1 hour together, and the last 15 minutes you're going to be asking me questions. So I've got 45 minutes to figure out everything I can about you and the level that you're at. So there was actually a book that came out called How Would You Move Mount Fuji, and it was about all these brain teasers that Microsoft used to ask their employees. It's an interesting book if you want to read it. I really don't like this philosophy of interviewing, and we are strictly against it at Capcom. But there are companies that do this that'll ask you a question. How many gas stations are in New York? And it's like, why would I need to know that? And I don't know if this is about how good are you at estimating something or, gathering data, coming up with some analysis of, a problem that you don't understand. But, on an interview, putting somebody on the spot in 45 minutes, I think my personal opinion is that's a big waste of time. So still be prepared for questions like this, because somebody might ask you that, but I'm not going to ask you. Here's some questions that I'm going to ask you. Remember, I've got those 8 attributes that I'm silently ranking you on in the back of my head. So I call this my toolbox. So tell me about some software you've written in your free time. This tells me if you're passionate about code. Are you writing code in your free time? So is everyone here writing code in their free time? Okay, if you aren't, you saw how many hands went up? Those are the people that you're competing against. Is that guy beside you, that girl beside you who is writing code in their free time? You two are competing for the same job. So write code in your free time. Do it for fun. And I'm going to dig deeper into that code. I'm going to ask you about it, ask you about features. And all in the back of my head, I'm evaluating how well do you know C++, how good is your debugging, how good is your problem solving. All these attributes I'm rating you on, I can get out of this question. Let's talk about something on your resume. If I see something on your resume that I really like, that we really need, we're going to talk about it. And we're going to talk about it in depth because I need to know how much you know about it. This is my favorite question, and I guarantee you will get asked this question somewhere along the interview process at Capcom. How do you crash a program? Think about this for a second. How about if I give you like 15 seconds to think about different ways to crash a program and count them in your head, how many you come up with? So most people in an interview will get 4 or 5. How many did you get? Anyone get more? Now, I've been looking at this question for a while. When I think about it, and because I do game development all the time, and I'm doing C++ from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. every single, well, I write code for fun when I get home. But because I'm doing so much C++, I can come up with 11. I gave myself a minute this morning to answer this question. I came up with 11 different ways that programs can crash. And the only way that you're going to know a lot of ways that programs crash is if you're actually writing code and you understand what's going on under the hood in C++. Might give you a logical problem. You know, you're going to use the worst code editor in the world, this chalkboard or a whiteboard. This is your code editor. I'm going to say, write me a program that reverses the words in a string. I pass in a char star. That's a string in C++. Write me a program to reverse the words, and you're going to have to do it. And then we're going to step through it, and we're going to debug it. So I'm going to see your C++, your debugging, your problem-solving ability, all these things. Find the depth of a tree. I don't know why, but somewhere along the way, everyone always asks you to find the depth of a tree. So if you do interview at Capcom, be prepared to answer this. Somebody's going to ask you that. Let's talk about null pointers. What do you think of null pointers, everybody? Aren't they great? Should you check for null pointers? Why? Okay. Here, let's. I'm going to use the whiteboard here. So let's add this. This is a function that we had on Need for Speed, and this is an actual situation we got in. So I had a function called float get speed, and then you would pass in a vehicle star. Okay. So you're saying we should check this, I guess. This is our pointer. So okay, so if let's use C++ 11 here. There's a keyword in C++ 11. If you don't know this, check C++ 11. Something for you to Google to learn when you in your free time. So if null pointer is v, okay, what do I do? Okay. Okay, return -1. So I return -1, otherwise I can return whatever, v speed. All right, so this was an actual piece of code that was in the Need for Speed code base. And instead of -1, though, they actually had 0 in there. So I'll change this to say 0. So 0 point F. You know why we put the F there? Makes it a float. Yeah. So then we're not casting any values. But so this was some actual code that was in the Need for Speed code base. And one day, QA guy comes to us and he says, you know what? When I play the game online, none of the cars are moving. You know, everyone's car is just standing still. And we're like, well, what's going on? So now we got to solve this. So it's like, you know what? I play the game single player, everything's fine. So I go online and I have a problem. Everybody has one Xbox on their desk, you know. So to set up an online environment, that's going to take me a couple hours to do it. So I go in there, set up my online environment, and it took me a couple hours. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I go play online. Sure enough, the cars aren't moving. And I'm like, well, the first thing I want to check is what's the speed that's getting passed from one from one machine to the other. So I'm digging in and I'm debugging this thing, going deeper and deeper and deeper, and everything looks fine, but I see on the other end, hey, there's this 0 comes out of it, and somewhere along the way, there was a null pointer going through the system, and instead of actually trapping that error where it happened, to say, hey, our data's bad, there's this null pointer in there, there was this get speed function that returned 0. And so the program carried on its main, its merry way, but it just said 0 speed on the car. So all the online cars stayed still, and we probably wasted 2 days tracking this thing down. So my philosophy on null pointers is what would happen if we had this, and that's null. Program's going to crash immediately. So there's different philosophy on this. Now, I actually had a really heated argument with another engineer at Capcom about this, because he was doing a null pointer check and then returning 0 in a case where it was kind of okay to do that, but it was in a loop that would fire about 5,000 times every second, and the cost of that was very bad. And we actually had in our debug build, he was returning, it's okay to, let's say, return an error message. I liked your first answer, because that error message can give us some details about what's going on. So right away we say, hey, this is null, and then it's really easy for me to track back that pointer. So this argument I had with this other senior engineer, this was costing us a lot of CPU power, doing all these checks on data that was never ever null. So my thought is we have a very large quality assurance team that does a lot of testing on the game. It's like tens of thousands of hours of testing before a game gets shipped. So my philosophy on null pointers is if anything is null in there, tens of thousands of hours of quality assurance testing of everyone walking through every corner that there is to walk in the game, they're going to find every single null pointer in the game. And every time they hit one of these, if that's null, they're going to get a call stack back from it. So it's very easy to debug a null pointer that you don't check for. So, but anyway, I got some swag for you, because that's a great question. So I got a copy of, it's a great answer. Thanks for being my guinea pig there. Copy of Dead Rising 3 for Xbox One. What's going on here? What did I do? Okay. Next one. Let's talk about documentation. Should you write documentation? Yes. Why? So other people can read your code. Okay. And I had this exact conversation with Eric last night. Get speed. So what do I document here? What should be my documentation for this function? Sure, let's ask a new guy here. Preconditions and postconditions. So I'm going to do like a comment up here with preconditions and postconditions. What's it going to say? It's going to say gets the speed. How long is that going to take you to write all that stuff? I'm not going to give you swag. No, saving it for the end. So this conversation Eric and I had, I don't need to document this. It gets the speed of the vehicle. Like, why would I document that? All the time that you spend on documentation, if nobody's ever going to read it, if it's totally useless, that's wasted time. That's time you could have spent working on more features for your game. Like, how much documentation are you guys writing on your Unity game? 0. And when you come to an interview, I want you to be prepared to talk about why you wrote no documentation. Because after this GameJam, is anybody, your code might just totally die. Or you can always write documentation later. But for the time being, you've got a deadline. You've got to get this thing out the door. There's no sense wasting your time writing documentation that nobody actually needs. Now, there are times that I do. Like if I use some really crazy algorithm that somebody might not be able to understand from reading the code, I'm going to put comments in there about exactly why I did it. Or if I have some event that, I don't know when it's actually running in the code, something that I'll say, okay, this event fires when a remote player connects to my game online. This is the event. I'll write little notes like that. Let's talk about the H word. It's a 4-letter word. Hack. Isn't that awful? You ever hack stuff? I am suggesting all of you to get your game done, hack it. I've made a career out of being a hacker. I go in there, I put magic numbers in everywhere. I am every professor's worst nightmare when it comes to coding standards. But you know what? A magic number, it's very fast, and if the user doesn't notice the difference, who cares? You know, it's fast to put it in, it executes quickly, and they just work. So hack away, hack smart. Know when to use a hack. But you know, when you come to an interview, I expect you to be able to talk about these things and have an opinion. And I don't care if your opinion's the same as mine. Have an opinion, be able to back it up. The heap and the stack. Does everyone here know what the heap and the stack are? Probably about half of us, maybe. Know what the heap and the stack are. Somebody's going to ask you about this when you come into an interview. This is a pretty common question for like a phone interview. This is something I don't need a whiteboard, so I might ask you this. Okay, let's talk some vector math. Can you find the distance from that point to that line? When you get home, take out your phone right now if you want. Take a picture of this, because this is something that you need to know if you want to come work at Capcom. As a programmer, you need to know this. So take out your phone or whatever. When you get home, try to take a picture or try to figure this out. Just draw a line, draw a point. I'll leave it up there for about 5 seconds more. The next question is my favorite vector math question. And about half the people who interview, they can find the answer right away. You know, or at least they start working on it. The next one. Okay, you have 3 points. Show me how to find the point in the middle that's equidistant from all of them. Think about that for a second. Do you know where you'd even start? Well, I've got some hints coming, but how do you think so? There's no numbers. You know, that could be any number. Let's say it's okay. Okay. You know your vector math, don't you? See, this is what we expect. We expect answers like that. You know, I usually start with a circle just to say that, hey, if I put these on the circle, there's one way of finding it is I could find the equation for that circle that contains the 3 points, and that equation is going to tell me the center point of that circle. You know, so we've got the matching radius. The other way is, yeah, draw your triangle and bisect all those lines. So. But when you get this question on the whiteboard, I expect you to get up there and start drawing vectors and start working your way through the problem. If you don't know the answer right away, I expect you to be able to work your way to the answer and find it by applying your vector math. End of the interview. So you get to the end of the interview. I want you to use this time. Be prepared for it. Clear up any unknowns. There's probably a lot of questions you have about this, you know, about the job you're applying for, maybe about the city you might be living in. You know, this is it's a big thing if you're going to come work for another company, especially if you relocate. So clear up any unknowns that you have. You can ask your interviewer anything you want. You know, they may not give you an answer, but don't be afraid to ask anything. You know, we've all been on both sides of the chair or both sides of the table. Here's some questions that I've been asked, some really good ones. Somebody asked me what I expect of them in their first 3 months on the job. Great question. If you interview a senior guy who's worked at a number of different places, you know, this is a great question to ask. How does this compare to a lot of the other places you worked? And that you can tell a lot about this senior guy, you know, and you can tell a lot about him. You'll be able to tell a lot about the company you're interviewing at. It's, you know, keep in mind, this guy might end up being your boss, very likely will. Who comes up with the project requirements? Something that you don't deal with a lot in university, or maybe, I don't know if we do or not here, but just requirements gathering. You know, it's something that you're going to have to do a lot of on the job, is you're going to have a customer. You're going to have somebody coming to you with a spec. You know, in video games, we have designers saying that's their job, is just to design the game. And they come to me and say, hey, this is my main game mechanic, you know. So It's a good question to ask. Who comes up with these? You know, do the programmers themselves? Is there somebody in Japan telling us how to make the game? You know, or do we have guys in-house? You know, is he going to be sitting beside me? Can I talk to him all the time? Or do we need to write some documentation and it's going to be translated from Japanese into English? That doesn't happen at Capcom. The guy's sitting right beside me, actually. And he's somebody I hired, so I definitely like him. Yeah, and the other thing to know, so at Capcom, like a lot of companies will have an open position and they'll hire they'll interview 3 or 4 people and they'll pick the best candidate. I don't really like that philosophy. I more like the philosophy that if a smart person comes in for an interview, we're going to hire him and we're going to find a role for him. So we've got 50 open positions. Everybody we're interviewing, you know, there's a good chance we're going to hire you. You know, so don't think that, you know, yes, you are competing against other people, but no, you're not competing against them for the same job. If you're a smart person, if you interview well, you're going to get an offer. And this is just what we do. You know, we just want to hire a lot of smart people, and it ends up working well. That was the whole EA philosophy. I think this is my last slide for this. I didn't have anywhere else to put it, but there's some non-technical skills that, you know, you're only going to learn them on the job. These are things you probably won't be taught in university. Maybe we will, but I doubt that they teach them here. Stuff like estimation. How do you give a good estimate? You know, this is something that I had no idea how to do, and I ended up taking a workshop later in my career on how to give a proper estimate. You can't just pull a number out of the air. That's useless. But project managers, the company that you work for, all the schedules and everything relies very heavily on estimates. So being able to give a good estimate that assesses risk, that assesses, you know, a lot of things, the best case scenario, worst case scenario, you know, being able to do that is a very critical skill. Gathering customer requirements. I want you to try do something. Write some software for somebody else. You know, talk to your parents. Say, hey, Mom, I want to write you some software that manages all of your recipes, and you know, and try to write this software and get them to tell you what they want, and try to write it for them, and see how difficult this actually is to satisfy a customer. You know, it's quite difficult to do. It's a skill that you're only going to learn by doing it, or if you have somebody helping you do it. Making business-based decisions, such as checking for null pointers. You know, we don't check for null pointers because in the end that could cost us a lot of money if we just return 0. But if we make a better decision about it, you know, it's going to be a good situation. What I got here? So and then also realize when you come into a new company, everyone in there, it's going to be very intimidating at first because everyone in there knows all of the internal tool sets and systems, and you're going to feel like, hey, these people are way smarter than me, they know a lot more than me. It's like, no, they've just been using all these tools for longer than you have, and you're going to pick them up in your first month or 2, and you're going to be right up to speed with everyone else. So, you know, just have a few pictures to show you some of the things that go on in Vancouver, my little recruiting spiel. So this is my Xbox. Isn't that awesome? Super Ultra Dead Rising 3 Arcade Remix Hyper Edition EX Plus Alpha limited edition Xbox. So at Comic-Con last year, Microsoft, they picked about 5 of their biggest titles of the year, and they made custom Xboxes for them, and they raffled them all off. Well, they only raffled off 4 for each game, and then they gave 1 to the game team. And so Capcom gave me this Xbox. I worked very hard on this game. I lost a lot of sleep. I lost a girlfriend. I lost, you know, it was rough. I went through a pretty rough time. There were times when I only slept because the Perforce server was rebooting, and I couldn't actually do any work. And I don't regret it. It was a decision I made. You're not going to be expected to do that. The hours aren't like that, but this was just something I cared so much about my product, and this was my first chance as a lead engineer leading an entire team that I took, you know, I sacrificed this, and in the end, this is in the middle of my living room, and it's freaking awesome, and I love turning on this Xbox. So we talked about getting bad reviews. You know, somebody asked me on my first day here, what's it like when your game gets released and you get a 50 Metacritic? It's awful, but then there's the other side of the equation where we did this Super Ultra Dead Rising 3. We announced it the moment it went live at E3, and everyone's like, nobody does this anymore. This is amazing. and IGN nominated us for Best of E3. We had a budget of about $10 million. We were going against World of Tanks that has a budget of about $500 million, and they didn't get a nomination. We did, so it's like all this hard work was like we were rock stars there. We're wearing our shirts, and everybody wanted to come by and play our game at our booth, and it was awesome. It was such a cool feeling. Halloween's a good time. We have good prizes for Halloween. Dress up. I didn't even come close to winning a prize. Megumi, I think she got like some consolation prize. But there's things like weekends in Whistler and Xboxes, whatever. You're competing against a lot of artists who also work in the movie industry as costume designers. So as a programmer, it's quite difficult. Do something very techy, like with an iPad that you can see through the other side or something like that. But Halloween's pretty big around our office. Vancouver, you're going to run into a lot of famous people. It's just, there's a lot going on in Vancouver. It's a nice city. There's me with Danny Trejo. Movember. I just had this picture. It's pretty bad. Do a lot of salmon fishing. This is 5 minutes out of downtown Vancouver. So went out with a bunch of the guys. Some of the guys there have boats. Did some salmon fishing, caught some. There's a couple of my rendering programmers catching Dungeness crab, and then you can just eat it on the dock. It's a pretty cool place to live. Anyway, I want to hire you. So write code in your free time. Everything I got here. Know your algorithm, C++, vector math, and play video games. There's my email. Email me anything you want, anytime. I will get back to you. So, yeah, that's it. That's the presentation. Okay. Now, I have another presentation coming up if anybody wants to stick around for it. It gets into some pretty deep problems that we've experienced on game teams. So it's going to be some pretty intense C++. By no means do you have to be, sit here through it. But if you're interested in that kind of thing, stick around and I'll show you just how high the bar gets. So. We could do some questions if you want, but yeah, if anyone wants to get back to doing their game, go for it. I'm totally not offended. Questions? Anyone? So it's not really a career stage. It's more of a company that you work for type of thing. Like, Lee's company, they have that office they never go to. Capcom is very corporate. Like, everyone has to be there at 10 a.m. The core hours are 10 to 4. You're expected to do 8 hours a day. So, you can come in a bit early, a bit late, but, there are meetings throughout the day that you need to be there for. So, yeah. Yes. Oh, are we in a tech bubble right now? I don't know. I think as far as video games go, like I was saying earlier, the Canadian dollar's down right now, and as long as the Canadian dollar's low, there's going to be a lot of tech work in Canada because it's really cheap for American companies. Like EA is based out of the U.S. and they have offices all over, so it's very cheap for them to send their work up here. So yeah, right now there are a lot of open jobs, and Japan's doing the same, right, with Capcom, is they're trying to make us make more games, but we can't hire enough people to do it. Yeah. Good.